Innovation. For me, it's about responding to a particular challenge in a manner that would not have previously been thought of. And it's interesting that we're talking about innovations for the Most Innovative Companies Award. Right now, we're innovating because it's the first time we're doing this event in a digital format because we've had to respond to the challenges of COVID that has hit us since 2020. So, welcome. My name is Lance Witten. I will be your host for today. With me is Wesley Dipoko, the Editor-in-Chief of Fast Company South Africa. Wesley, welcome.
Thank you, Lance. We are excited that we are hosting this event virtually for the very first time, and which is why it's called the Most Innovative Companies Summit and Awards. And we're hosting it virtually. We are trying to make sure that we don't miss out on the companies that really did well throughout 2020. And we also wanted to make sure that viewers at home can also learn more about what these companies were up to during 2020.
So we've also got Farah Kalf here, who has been crucial in putting together the Fast Company South Africa magazine throughout the last couple of years, and of course the Most Innovative Companies edition. Wesley, tell me a little bit about where the most innovative spaces have been in the companies that we'll be covering today.
So we've seen lots and lots of innovations, I would say, throughout 2020. I mean, if you take into account the fact that we've had challenges in education, we've had challenges obviously in health, how people work. I mean, you think about the retail space. All of these have been areas of challenges for society. Yet we've seen companies doing something in those spaces. We have companies in the e-learning space. We've got companies in the e-commerce space that some of them were not even in that environment, but some of them have had to pivot and become enablers of society for people to learn, for people to access health services, for people to be able to buy. You know, these days we order a lot of stuff via the popular apps, you know, and this is because of the innovation by these companies. So we celebrate such companies because why not? I mean, we ought to shine a spotlight on the people that kept us going throughout 2020.
You've mentioned e-commerce, you've mentioned health, you've mentioned education. What other big sectors have seen amazing growth as a result of the direct impact and the almost the forcible pivoting that they've had to do?
So the truth is that we've seen growth in various sectors. So there is no one, but one that for me has been very interesting is retail. You know, the fact that people all of a sudden were afraid of going to crowded spaces. Obviously, there were limitations in the beginning of the pandemic, if you want. So you had companies that all of a sudden figured out ways of enabling us to buy stuff, whether it be food, whether it be normal items that we would have had to travel to get them. So I think for me, the retail space. So obviously, this is retail plus tech, which gives us e-commerce. It's been an interesting one. You know, there are interesting, areas around education as well, I think, because, kids could not go to school, and there's a huge interest in figuring out different ways of accessing education. So that for me, is another one. As a result, we have companies that we've seen, emerging really because of that. I think the other interesting one, which is what Farah will be touching on a bit, is also health. Health, is the biggest challenge of 2020, which for people like me, it got me thinking, you don't ever want to go to hospital during this time, for obvious reasons. So yeah, I think we've had an interest. But I think one sector that I think we don't talk a lot about, and we assume that there's nothing that happened with it, is financial services, fintech. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm sure we're going to be speaking a lot about that. And I know that we've got a couple of guests later on in the summit, which are just going to blow your mind in the way they've managed to change the way they do business. I want to come to Fada now. Fada, just as a journalist, how has your life changed? How have you had to pivot as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think it's been a challenge, but it's also been a learning experience. Basically, just, you spend a lot of time online gathering your information from online sources as opposed to being out in the world or on location.
Something else that also struck me, I mean, everyone is working remotely. Everyone has had to, or not everyone can work remotely, but the majority of the corporate world has had to pivot to a remote working sort of environment. What kind of challenges that presented to you?
I think just finding a balance, when you work and your workspace and your personal space is all combined into one. It's almost as if you can't compartmentalize the sections of your life. So I think that working remotely, one of the biggest challenges for me has been finding a balance and just being able to switch off and switch on at the right time. Yeah.
That's a big one. Wesley, you need to get somebody to develop an app for that, please. Like understanding work-life balance, because for me that's just I struggle with that. That's personal, something that I struggle with. There is a very important guest that I think you would like to introduce us to now as we move forward to the summit. But before we do that, I want to talk about this is our second Most Innovative Companies Summit, building on last year. What can we expect this year slightly differently from what we experienced last year?
Yeah, so last year we had the Most Innovative Companies Conference, right? So this year we have the Most Innovative Companies Summit. So that's I would say where the difference is. And we obviously celebrate people at a very difficult time. We celebrate innovation in business and businesses that have had to be challenged by so much. I mean, it's not just the pandemic, it's the blackouts, I call them. It's I don't know what the other word they use for it. It's
that dreaded L word, yeah.
So that, and obviously, Farah touched on it, the fact that we've had to work from home. So we celebrate those companies that have kept us going during that time. So one part of this has been about changing from traditional institutions like traditional banks to digital banks, from traditional ways of paying to different ways of paying.
Fantastic. So without further ado, let's go to Adrian.
Hi, I'm Adrian Gore, CEO of Discovery. It's actually interesting. The bank has roots that go quite far back in Discovery. We started with the Discovery card. That's more than a decade ago, with the idea then that we could kind of incentivize people to be healthy, in a sense part of the banking business through the Discovery card. And then the success of that, I mean, the card did really well, kind of spurred us on to thinking, could the shared value behavioral model fit into a bank? And I think just the kind of, as we've learned more about the data and the statistics, the fact that just a few behaviors like health, like banking, determine the outcomes. That's the power of this thing. So, people having too much debt, not saving for retirement, not being insured when they need to be insured for a rainy day, etc., drives all of their defaults and their financial outcomes. So exactly the same as health, we could see how the model would apply to banking. And so we started to develop this very strong conviction that we could take the Discovery card and evolve it into a full-scale bank. The whole model has evolved over the last decade into a very disciplined shared value model of behavior. And to an extent, that was the basis of Discovery Bank. Could we take just a few behaviors, take the vitality structure, put it into a bank? And that was really the start. it's an intriguing issue. I think that there's been a lot of innovation in the banking space, fintechs and neobanks that have come about. To an extent, I mean, I think they're using technology predominantly to change banking into a very simple, easy, no frills platform. Our approach has been different with technology. I mean, I think we've using the technology to track behaviors, to translate those behaviors dynamically into interest rates that flex, into a Vitality money structure that's a very complex engine that determines how well you're managing your money, and then into linking into all of our Vitality partners, into all the payment systems, and more will come. So it's kind of a full-fledged concept of taking the power of mobile, the power of behavioral economics, the power of data, and creating this bank in the palm of your hands that's entirely cashless on the face of your mobile, that tracks everything you do and brings it into a simple set of benefits, a Vitality money status, better rates of interest, better rewards, better discounts, better payment systems, and all of it is kind of linked. But the beauty of it, I think, is it's using technology to kind of coalesce an incredibly complex world into something simple and I think quite beautiful on the face of the mobile. I mean, that's the idea. Here's your bank, here's your Vitality money. Your whole Discovery world is sucked into there, and I think it's super powerful. Well, it's the central, I mean, the entire Discovery model is on this idea of, kind of a Vitality behavioral chassis. Based on your behavior, it translates into benefits, whether it's life insurance, health insurance, how you drive. And the same thing with Discovery Bank, this concept of Vitality money measures exactly how you manage your money. I mean, traditional banking works on really how rich you are. Determines, you have a blue card or a gold card or a matte black card based on your income level. This is not like that at all. This is based on how you manage your money, regardless of your state of income. So Vitality money really sucks all the data in and allows us to measure how you're managing your money based on Vitality money points. And you get a status like you do with the rest of Discovery products. And that status gives you benefits inside the bank. So it really is the kind of the heart and soul of how the banking behavioral model works. Everything kind of hangs off there. And we're hoping for a system that, although it's complex behind the scenes, for the customer it's simple. You can see how you're managing your money on a variety of categories. You get a status. Intuitive, simple, and hopefully very, very appealing. I think there's maybe two dimensions to it. We kind of looked at the pandemic when it came along our staff, our people, our customers and society. So we kind of broke up our responsibility into those three areas, and we focused very hard, as you'd understand, we're a financial institution, on financial strength, solvency, capital, liquidity through a pandemic. And I think across all of those, I think we're very, very pleased how the organization has performed. I mean, it's the kind of the scale, I need not say the scale, the tragedy of this thing. You know what I'm saying? We're kind of navigating an incredibly profound time. The use of technology has been fairly fundamental. I think the ability to get 12, 15,000 people at home servicing clients seamlessly has been, I think many businesses have done that, but I think that the pace at which Discovery across South Africa, across the UK, across many markets across the world has managed to get our people at home servicing our clients kind of business as usual has been remarkable. So we use technology, I think, in a very conventional sense in that regard. The other point, and maybe I'm slightly off topic, is we've used technology to create a very different kind of sense of unity. The organization has been built on this idea of a core purpose, make people healthier, a set of values, and a very inspired kind of collective of our people. We've used technology to have webinars every few weeks to kind of inspire our staff to have, we really pioneered this, keeping the cadence up, keeping people engaged. So without that technology, I think we wouldn't have been successful. And I think the critical thing, we've served our clients differently. The Vitality model is a very physical one. People in the gyms, people tracking driving. The pandemic forced people into their homes. So we use technology to actually bring physical activity into the home. Working with Peloton in the UK, bringing Apple Watches and devices. So the entire physical activity regime could be in the home environment. So we've really used the entire Discovery Vitality model to exist on the face of the phone, where people can exist kind of in their homes. So I would say to you that every aspect of the group, from data to technology to just the purpose, has been really tested during the pandemic. And I think it's been a profound and tragic time, but I think a remarkably successful time in terms of our purpose. And we're not through this thing. There's a lot to be done. The main thing with this COVID is trying to protect people from the effect of the illness. And as we know from the data, there's certain age groups, certain risk factors that make you susceptible to severe illness and potentially death. So through the data we have so much data on our people, and we've been always committed using data for good. The ability to actually model and understand which people are really at risk, to reach out to them, to warn them, to educate them, to guide them. We've done it very, very proactively. And then to send things like pulse oximeters to help people actually monitor certain levels when they're ill, as to when they need to be hospitalized. So we've taken a very, very, how can I say, proactive, engaged approach to actually not just telling people about educating and guiding, but actually getting involved in trying to predict when they could be severely ill, get them to the hospital at the right time, interface with the healthcare system. So again, the model about kind of understanding people's state of health, understanding people's risk factors, and then using the data to predict has been a fundamental, I think, success of how the Discovery model has worked. Well, I think I think leadership, I think authentic leadership in difficult times is important. I think leadership is always important, but I think in difficult times you need strong and firm leadership. It's not my leadership alone. I mean, I think the group has got a very committed set of leaders, and I think everything we do, we actually counter-cyclical. We tend to focus in difficult times on building new businesses like Discovery Bank. Ironically, our first year is during a pandemic. I mean, it's bizarre. But the role of leadership in difficult times, I think, cannot be overstressed. I've always strongly believed that leadership should be purpose-based. So the idea of making people healthier has been our cornerstone of everything we do, and a set of values that we don't violate. And during this pandemic, every single thing I've been doing, and I think our leadership team has been doing, has been about banging away about how to protect people against the pandemic, how we're a force for good, and every single decision has been weighed up against those kind of factors. And the organization has been involved, I think, in proactively protecting our customers, as we spoke about, all the way through to changing regimes, all the way through to our people working in the kind of the national vaccine rollout program, and trying to help in that process. So the leadership, I think, has been through every single issue, and I kind of really believe that the leadership during times like this has got to be optimistic, positive, but also authentic. The things we don't know, the things we're worried about. I think our people in Discovery know we don't know it all. We can't figure it all out, but there's a sense, I think, of the group having a very, very deep conviction. We'll get through this thing, we'll protect people. There will be casualties, there will be difficulties, there will be pain, but I think it has been a very, very authentic process for the leadership team. I think nothing more important during this time. Well, it's a complex issue because the Section 59 actually found no actual algorithms or biases in the processes. There's kind of like there's an entrenched set of complex situations in our society. So we've been pretty clear about the outcome. I mean, it's out for comment, the Section 59 report, but we've been very clear. We're completely respectful of the process. We think the recommendations that are being made are very good. We kind of acknowledge strongly just the history of the country and how these kind of difficulties and problems emerge. But it has to be said, we do not agree with the conclusion that there are any racist structures in and in fact, if you read the report, they acknowledge it as well. So, I mean, I'm hoping that it's part of a narrative to improve society. You know what I'm saying? I think we have to make sure that every single process is equitable, fair, and get better results out of it. Well, I think there's a lot of risks in the environment. There are a lot of risks of how we get through this thing, and I think we have to be realistic as we roll the program out. And there are tail events, that can happen that we have to be concerned about. But I'm actually optimistic. I think that we will get through the vaccine program. I think the world will go back into a kind of a post-COVID period. But I think that there's some exciting issues. I think the issue of health, I think the issue of wellness and resilience. I think people actually understand now that looking after yourself and managing your health is the difference between living and dying through a thing like this. So I think that kind of our purpose of making people healthier, I think, is elevated dramatically. I think the exciting power of technology, we're talking earlier about the bank, there were debates about branches, and I think people don't deal with money anymore. I think, we're moving into a world where things are tech-based, you know what I'm saying? So I think things are rushing on. I think in the world of healthcare itself, virtual consultations, using technology for healthcare makes it more efficient, is racing ahead, and I think that's exciting. Capitalism has been under attack. I think there's a very strong movement towards purpose, towards climate, towards all those good things in the ESG environment. I think companies are going to be focused on doing good, I believe. And then I'm hoping that we're heading for strong economic growth globally over time, as we come out of this pandemic. So it is a very difficult time, but I think around the issues of behavior, of purpose, of technology, of a better form of capitalism, hopefully we're going to better times, and we're preparing for that. it's a great question. I mean, a few thoughts, and I hope they don't sound patronizing. I mean, one is, I think that innovation has got to be purpose-led. You know, I think if you're just innovating randomly, I think it's very tough to do. You know, so we've had a very clear North Star, make people healthier. Every single innovation that we've done, from medical savings accounts to vitality to our shared value model, ultimately to the banking, is about how do we get people to be healthier, to have a better life. It's been a very consistent theme. So the first point I would make is that innovation needs to be purpose-built and authentic. Secondly is that it's an interesting point, and I hope, again, it's a clear point. I find the best innovations come with the end in mind. In other words, it's vision-based. You've got to kind of formulate the problem. You know, Vitality was built out of this very simple idea of, you know, how do we get people to use the gyms in a way that's effective and affordable? And by having that problem statement, we solve backwards to say, what if they earned it by earning points to get there? You know what I'm saying? That's Vitality. You know, that's how it could work. So to an extent, I found that the best innovations aren't from kind of bottom-up doing market research. It's more like, can you formulate the problem? Can you formulate what you're trying to do? If you can formulate what you're trying to do, then typically you actually can find a way to get there. So I've seen, if you look at all of our big innovations, typically they've been about the end in mind, defining the end and then getting there. And then maybe one last comment is, innovation is not limited. People often tend to think that, you know, how much innovation can you do? I find it's the other way around. An innovative company leads to more innovation. So we start out with physical activity, then physical activity led to nutrition, then nutrition led to this, then physical activity led to devices, then devices led to Peloton, then you know, and Zwift. You know, it's just an infinite world. So the more you innovate, the more doors you open. I think an innovative organization makes its people feel safe to raise ideas. You know what I'm saying to you? There's no hierarchy on ideas. If you want to be the smartest guy in the room, you will not create an innovative company. Innovation about saying to people, listen, you know, bring forward ideas, let's debate them. No sacred cows, no one's smarter than anyone else. And I think if you create that safety for people to be able to say stupid ideas, you know, 1 out of 1,000 ideas is brilliant and is transformational. So sorry, it's a potpourri of ideas. I would say authentic, I would say driven by purpose, I would say definitely iterative, in search of more and more innovation, and then a culture of trying to, an optimistic, safe environment where people feel safe to innovate, I think is critical.
Wow, that certainly was quite enlightening. It is amazing to see how a massive business like Discovery can pivot and almost reinvent themselves into a new space. So thank you very much to Adrian Gore, the founder and CEO of Discovery Group. Now, it doesn't necessarily take a behemoth to display innovation. As we will see from our next group of guests, we're going to show how small organizations can really make a massive impact in people's lives. I am going to allow Farah to vacate her seat so that she's able to make space for some of our new guests, and we'll meet them right now.
So the most innovative companies, naturally it's a process that involves the public. The public nominates companies. So Ozo today, joining us, Thomas Pays, is one of those companies that was nominated in 2020 and was one of the most innovative companies. So Thomas, tell us, what is the state of fintech in South Africa right now?
So if you talk about South Africa, I think we showing great evolution, you know, compared to Nigeria and Kenya that have been leading the way to date. What we've seen over the past couple of years is a migration from a tech perspective of many companies setting up shop in Cape Town, not only South Africa, to a point where about 3 years ago, we anticipated that Cape Town, and especially South Africa, would become the next Silicon Valley of Africa, which I think was announced last year from a new hub perspective. So as much as we're in the infancy of technology, it's good to see that we're leading the way.
I just want to jump in here quickly. There's a particular product that Ozo has, right? And it's called Ozo Revolution. What exactly is Ozo Revolution? What is it about?
So we're an impact-driven company. We wanted to look at how could we innovate where many others have failed. And if you look at the challenge that we have is, you can talk about Google, you can talk about PayPal, many of the payment companies are global. They develop first world country and then try to use that first world country technology and bring it to third world country. The challenge is the culture is different. The internet access is different. So we wanted to have a different approach, which is how can we create a third world technology for the African continent, for South Africa. And ultimately we created it. It's called the Ozo app. And out of this, we realized that we need to start the revolution. No better person than a Frenchman to start a revolution, you'll agree. And ultimately, that's how we started. You know, we want to be a successful business because that's what allows you to be impactful. But more importantly, we want to be driven by impact, and we want to develop free to access technology app. And that's where the revolution started. And it started last year when we started offering free payment access for street vendors and SMEs, ultimately.
So what kind of further impact have you seen since launch? Have you've managed to solve some very real problems?
I mean, if you think about it, for those that are watching, we in 2021, we've gone through a hell of a year, excuse the pun. And what was the biggest restriction for many South Africans is access to payment, is access to internet. I mean, think about it from a quarantine perspective. People that did not have access to card or cash, how could they transact online when you have to stay under confinement? So for us, what was really interesting with Ozo is because we linked to someone's direct bank account, and there's over 49 million bank account holder in South Africa, we could empower people for the first time to partake in digital and financial inclusion. So what does that mean? Is someone in Milton Plains that did not have a credit card for the first time could use Takealot to place an order. We take it for granted, but for many, it's a right that they do not all have access to.
That's so true, and that has yielded very good results for you guys. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the outcome of your
Absolutely. You know, I think when you talk about result, all of a sudden it sounds like a bank, you know, which is what's the number, what's the revenue. I think from our perspective, we don't think that way. You know, we looked at it as, in retrospective, how many people did we end up impacting? We're a small business, you know, in Norway have we been around for decades, but last year alone, we were able to impact 2 million unique South African to transact, 60% of them being from township and rural area. So for us, this was really a great success. I think the exciting part here is that we're getting in excess of 120,000 new South African joining us every month, and this is growing at a double digit number on a quarterly basis, or even triple digit number per year. So we're excited. We know that this year we'll have 4 million people using us, and next year will be a bigger milestone because it will be in excess of 8 million. And to mark that milestone so that people can comprehend, 1 in 8 people have access to a credit card. By the time we reach that milestone, we would have achieved what global payment company or very well-established financial institution, we're never able to achieve or fail on delivering. So for us, again, talking about impact, this is something that's really close to our heart.
Interesting. Yeah, no, for sure. I think, we've been watching what you guys do, and I think it's right to ask you, when you look at South Africa in the fintech space, where do you see a future of this in this sector? What's the future looking like?
I think we've got a very bright future. We got the opportunity and luxury and honor to deal with investors in San Francisco, in Texas, in Europe, pretty much around the world, including Asia, not to forget them. And I think what's really interesting is there's this access to human capital that can be a challenge. And what's interesting when we're having this discussion is we're comparing as tech entrepreneurs, what is the difference between talent in the US and Africa? And ultimately, if you had to ask me if I had to hire someone in Silicon Valley or Cape Town for that matter as a developer, I would go for a Cape Town developer any day. And the reason for this is because people are hungry here. People want to succeed. They already know that they're on the back foot. And it's not like they have this luxury or opportunities that other engineers are exposed in other countries. And this sort of fuel, sometimes from a passion perspective, when it's translated into work, is what makes a major difference. So I think the next few decades in Africa are going to be an extraordinary journey for all of us.
Yeah, so true.
I think it really is, for me, a lot about democratizing that access, that access, that ability to pay. I think also from another perspective, if you look at someone who is running an e-commerce site, for example, having access to a payment gateway that works in a developing country, that's something that you guys have empowered small businesses with.
So we looked at this as a problem, funny enough, in the sense that why do you need a payment company for online payment? Then if you want point of sale payment, you need another payment method. If you want to start, accepting chat payment and SMS payment, and ultimately we realize that maybe there's some innovation that we can bring into this space. And via the Ozo app, again, we created a centralized, data-free app that would allow anyone to be able to accept, but also initiate payment, either in person, online, or anywhere, anytime. And again, making it data-free was quite important because, let's face it, we all at one stage might run out of data.
Yeah.
And being stuck and not being able to process a payment because of that seems like a bit of a challenge. So for us, we're quite impressed about the fact that no one thought about basically making it free access for all. But it's been one of the greatest success, again, for us.
All right, so we are talking about the most innovative companies in South Africa. And we can't talk about the most innovative space without talking about space. And here to talk about just that is Jonathan Lund. He is from Hypernova Space Technologies. Jonathan, welcome. Wesley, I'm going to hand over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lance, and welcome, Jonathan, once again. We are excited to finally get to talk to you and get to know yourself more, but also get to know Hypernova Space Technologies even more. Tell us about yourself. Who is Jonathan?
Sure. So my name's John. I grew up in Joburg, actually, in the old neighborhood of Kensington. Yeah. Loved it there. And in the last couple of years, I've moved down to the Western Cape to actually be part of a hub of companies and activity around the space industry. Yes. Not a lot of people know that there's actually activity in South Africa around space technology.
That is true. People think about space and they think about other parts of the world, and no one even considers Africa when we talk about the space industry, if you want. So tell us about the space industry. yes, particularly in our continent in South Africa, what kind of activities do we see right now?
Sure. So there's kind of two different arms around that. There's obviously the government involvement around space. We've had quite a lot of history around supporting space activities for other nations. We've got the South African Space Agency and Department of Science and Technology and DTI. And we've also got the other side, which is this commercial private group that's starting to form around serving South African technology to international clients. And so Hypernova really formed as, I guess, a culmination and inspiration from that to also help serve the space community.
Interesting. When we looked at Hypernova space technology, we wondered at some point, and especially myself, why a startup in South Africa would consider going into this tough industry. I mean, what motivated you to go into this as a startup?
Sure. So I loved space since I was a really young kid. I've always wanted to be an engineer, and I was inspired by things that happened with the space shuttle program and with the moon landings. And I kind of had this focus that I wanted to be involved in this inspiring and innovative field. And so I ended up studying mechanical engineering. I took my studies further, got involved with the space industry. And then, Hypernova is really a culmination of work that I think can help really make a big impact in the industry right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are a lot of challenges in the space industry. When I talk about challenges, I mean, there's so much to solve. I mean, just getting up there is one big, massive challenge. What solutions are you bringing? What are you trying to solve?
Yeah. So I think maybe about 20 years ago, companies like us probably would have a very hard time to get started and exist because access to space was just so difficult. And now with companies like SpaceX reducing the cost of launch and making access to launch hardware into space a lot easier, now it's actually the better time than ever now to build a space company. So the problem that we're trying to solve is not about how to get into space, but how do you move around once you're already there. So a lot of satellites, they don't have these engines to avoid colliding with other objects or changing their orbit or just being able to do a lot more and stay up for longer in space. So Hypernova is building a product or series of products to solve that problem by making these small rocket engines that are simple and easy for people to use to maneuver around in space.
Interesting. And are you already making impact? What kind of impact are you making currently or that you're hoping to make in the future?
Sure. So we are thinking a long term beyond just satellites. So really the core technology is around using ordinary metals as a fuel source for rockets. So that's quite a big game changer because all rocket fuel so far has been these really expensive, rare and dangerous fuel sources. And we're going to flip that totally around and say, let's use something as common as metal as a fuel source. And that totally opens up the field for not just getting fuel out there that's only available on Earth, but also out there possibly in space. And really opening up like an infrastructure for transporting things around.
Yeah, interesting. It's amazing to see such solutions really coming out of our country. When we look into the future, what do you see? What role do you think South Africa will be playing going forward, or even the continent in this space?
Sure. So there's a really key opportunity now for African countries and South Africa to really play more of an active role in the space industry. Right now we're seeing not just the Western countries, but also Asia and like India and Japan and China really getting involved with space. And they all recognize that this is going to be some of the biggest, most vibrant economies that can happen in the future. So I think the biggest thing that African countries can do is really help and enable commercial, I think, activity to happen, not just with funding, but I think also with legislation, making it easier and helping companies connect with the global community.
Yeah.
I just want to interject here and just ask some layman's questions. So, is it very difficult for a company that is based here in South Africa to be working with massive organizations dotted all around the world? How do you go about that?
Sure, that's a great question. So certainly there are challenges with being so geographically far away from countries like the US and China. But I think that a lot of what has been done before already is around, people understand that space is an international business, and there are always people working remotely all the time. So I think definitely as a company, we need to have an international perspective, not just think about South Africa on their own. If we have companies and customers that are a lot in Europe or in the US, then it makes sense for us to set up there. Just out of interest, one of the great things about South Africa is that we're in a very similar time zone to Europe. So we can actually serve those customers quite well because of that time zone similarity, which is kind of a fun fact.
Now, I can imagine that the space industry is a very niche industry.
Sure.
What kind of supporting industries are there around your industry specifically that you need help with? I mean, is there that infrastructure here in South Africa?
Sure. So I think in the past, people assume that, okay, it's space, you've got to have all these super expensive and specialized industries around you. But surprisingly, you'll find that we use quite a lot of local suppliers for helping build our hardware and our technology. And I think also you need to connect space with how it fits into other people's lives. And really, space is there to serve a need. It's not just to go there for the sake of going there. So people are using space now more and more for things like Internet of Things and communications, and making more informed decisions about the state of your company's infrastructure or logistics or your country. So I think when space becomes more integrated and with the economy, I think that's where we'll really see it flourishing.
So you're telling me, if I am an 8-year-old boy or an 8-year-old girl sitting at home watching this going, I also want to work in space, that's a realistic dream for somebody in South Africa.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Fantastic. I'm telling my kids that right now.
Jonathan, thank you very much for sharing such a powerful insight with us about the space industry. But I just want to say that we would like to hear more about these stories. We want to know that in South Africa, in the African continent, we have space industry that's active. So we're looking forward to hear more about your journey as you continue to build your startup.
Wow, I am learning so much, and I hope that you are too. I'm really enjoying what we have here today, and we have plenty more where that came from. So one of the important things that I view as innovation is solving a problem that is challenging some people. And here to address just such a problem, one of my biggest problems is staying on hold, is Peter de Villiers. He is from Clickatel. Peter, you said the very interesting space between communication and commerce. What is your product and how does it solve this problem of mine of having to be on hold when I need a service from someone?
That's a great question. I don't think any brand wants to put their customers on hold. yet they do it all the time, right? So, our purpose is to make the world a better place, and we do that through innovation and technology. And so, when you think about the communication and commerce intersection, that's where most of the customer journeys break down. So, the company has a long history of innovation, starting back 20 years when we designed the first messaging API. But more recently, we were able to create experiences where you never have to be on hold again. In fact, we get our clients to a commitment that within 14 months, we can get them to a place where they never have to put you on hold as a customer.
That is wonderful. I have no further questions, Your Honor. Thank you. Wes?
No, I think it's really exciting, and it makes me think of this space that Peter is operating in. It's called chat economy. Peter, what is the state of chat economy in South Africa?
Yeah, Wes, this is a good question. We have to go back in history to understand the present, right? So if you think about the internet economy back in 1997, we had the advent of e-commerce and internet banking. Yeah. And about 10 years later, we had the app economy with the launch of the iPhone, as we all know by now. Yeah. And that ushered in an age of the app economy and app banking, for that matter. And 10 years later again, 2017, the 4 largest chat platforms converted more active users than the 4 largest social media platforms. And in our world, that ushered in the chat economy. And therefore, as Clickatel, we were the first company in the world to launch chat banking. And also we believe that now the chat economy and chat commerce will become mainstream in the next 24 months.
Interesting. That's amazing, especially for our continent, but also South Africa, as we know how we play in this space. You've introduced a product in 2020, and this one you call?
Chat Desk.
Chat Desk, exactly. What does it do? Tell us about it.
When we launched the first credit card processing and payments in the world's largest chat platform at the time, which was WhatsApp, we soon discovered that consumers were very happy to self-serve on the WhatsApp platform. We do that all the time, right? We arrange our socials, we pay, friends and family. So we are comfortable with these chat platforms. In fact, we know from the data that you and I spend 90% of our time on only one of 5 mobile apps, and the most important one of those 5 is chat. So when we launched chat banking and chat self-serve and chat commerce, we soon discovered that consumers are getting stuck somewhere along the line. And this might be a query that's too complicated for the AI or the bots to understand. And so because we are at the intersection of customer experiences, we built what we call a chat desk. So at any point in time, a consumer can ask for help with a live human agent. So we call that assisted chat. Yep. You'll know a lot about AI and automation, and that's fantastic. But quite frankly, you cannot just leave your clients in the hands of a bot and hope that the bot will get it right. So what makes our chat desk different to what's out there before and why it's so innovative is that typically in a chat desk, when you chat to someone and you don't respond in time, the session stops and you have to start all over again. Well, that makes no sense, because when I send you an invite for a braai or a barbecue, you can come back the next day and I'll know what context it was. Yeah. So we did a lot of clever things on that side to make sure you can come back at any point in time, but not restart the conversation.
Yeah, interesting. I'm actually wondering how, if you think about COVID-19, the whole pandemic situation that we are in right now, how has this tool been used, particularly by big companies to navigate this world?
Yeah, Wesley, in the before times, call centers were already terrible experiences and already overwhelmed. And then COVID comes and it's insult to injury. And so we saw a massive surge in call center volume and also, quite frankly, call center agent fatigue. And call center agents would just not show up, almost call in sick because they can't handle the pressure. So what happened in our customer journey, in our product innovation, it just accelerated it, like most things on digital. And so the use cases that we have out in the market, we have hundreds of agents, live agents now on these platforms. Although it's a brand new platform, and hundreds of thousands of queries being handled. And we find several things. We find massive improvement, up to 4x in efficiency in terms of how quickly you can get resolved the query. We found ARPU, average revenue per user, increase up to 21%. And we found, more importantly, which is the most important metric, that customer satisfaction is up 8x on the chat self-serve and chat desk capability versus a call center hold experience. So we're very excited about where it's going.
Interesting. Yeah, and it can only be good for consumers in South Africa. And at this stage, one wonders, what does the future look like for the chat economy sector, if you want, going forward? I'm thinking adoption and how companies will use this going forward.
Yeah, it's definitely not a South African only thing. I mean, we have thousands of clients in the US and Europe, across the world. We do billions of interactions per year. It's very simply, imagine you never have to download another app in your life, and that you can do all the things that you would typically do inside an app in your favorite chat platform. And really, that's what we've built. And that's the leading innovation that we have. And we don't believe that as consumers, we have to constantly register for things and download things and sign up for things to get things done with the brands we love. And so I think that the idea that it's natural and simple, there's no learning curve, that's really what's so elegant about the solution, the simplicity of what we produce.
Yeah.
Peter, if I can just jump in here very quickly. You're talking about simplicity, and you mentioned earlier that the first company in the world to do this kind of thing, right? You're making the world smaller, and that can only be better. How do you... I mean, Wesley's talking about the future of adoption and penetration, but I mean, in essence, we are becoming so much closer, even though we are using a tool to communicate.
Yeah, it's a fact that something like a chat platform, whether it's WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or WeChat, their reach and penetration is 3 to 4x what apps are. It's all in the data, right? So, for example, in South Africa, you can reach 71% of the population through WhatsApp, and the best performing banking apps have a 24% reach. Now, those are the best performing apps. That's not your and my app we built in the garage trying to get market share. So this idea that we can take digital experiences to consumers that before never had them is a powerful one. And it includes things like financial inclusion, equitability around having a voice. So there's so many examples I can give you around how communications democratizes access. And then if you add commerce on top of it, it gives you the full power as a consumer to make those decisions in real time.
Amazing. And at this point in time, Peter, I want to say thank you very much for sharing such a powerful insight with us. I mean, there's no doubt that this is innovative. I mean, moving from so much struggle for consumers and to just being able to use a chat service to get access to a company. Thank you very much, Peter. I truly appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Peter de Villiers from Click It Up.
So welcome, Victor. We are excited to finally get to chat with you about Triplo and what Triplo does and essentially how it's really impacting the market, if I can put it that way. But firstly, let us talk about the industry broadly. Do you want to tell us about the logistics industry in South Africa and perhaps across the continent as well?
Okay. Now, thanks, Wesley, for having me on the call. Really appreciate it. And we're looking forward to sharing a bit more about the industry and what Triplo does. So basically, in logistics, there are four main types of services in logistics. You've got sea, air, rail, and freight. And road freight. And road is basically dominant, and it will be dominant for a long while. And actually, road is expected to contribute quite vastly to various economies. So, for example, in South Africa alone, about 10 to 15% of the GDP, based on research, actually goes into road freight. Because every other sector in the industry requires logistics to some extent, and everything that we consume for our homes and businesses actually has logistics involved in it. And it's actually estimated that South Africa alone spends about 580 billion rand a year just in logistics spend. And this number is even bigger in Africa, where it was estimated that people spend, I think, $160 billion a year on logistics. So yeah, so with every sector requiring logistics, it just shows the importance of it. And with COVID having happened started last year, what you found was logistics was one of the only few industries that was left open, especially during hard lockdowns in basically most African countries. So it just shows the importance of logistics. However, you know, three key players inside, when I talk of now logistics going forward, I'm going to be referring more to road freight. But in road freight, three key players are needed to operate quite closely and coherently together. So you find you've got cargo owners. You know, these are people that manufacture cargo or that actually retail the cargo. Or you've got cargo brokers. They sit in between. You know, you find warehousing companies, and you find some large transporters that have warehousing facilities, etc., for cargo to be stored. And then you find transporters who actually move the goods from point A to point B. And sadly, across the whole continent, you know, there are massive, massive issues. You know, the whole industry is very inefficient. It's opaque, it's quite unreliable, and it's very fragmented to the extent that African economies were estimated to be losing about $180 billion every year due to these inefficiencies, right? So you find like cargo owners get into costly contracts. There's a lack of visibility and transparency. There's unpredictability in terms of loading and offloading. And there's a very high risk of moving cargo across the continent. And that actually explains why cargo owners don't really do or want to do business with the small transporters, because of that high risk. They would rather enter into expensive contracts with like large players. And those large players ultimately end up using the smaller guys at the end of the day. But, you know, across centuries now, the whole industry has been very manual. You know, a lot of manual operations, no systems are talking to each other. You will find pockets of systems, but these are more in-house, you know, where a large company can afford to buy, you know, a $10 million system from Europe or America to run their operations, whereas a 1 to 50 truck operation cannot. Right, so the issues are quite massive, and the problems is quite big, and it's been there for centuries at a time.
Interesting. Those are massive challenges that I would assume, as you've indicated, have a serious impact in the economy. Now, having said that, how is Triplo solving current challenges in the logistics sector?
Cool. So it's a great question. So basically, having seen and experienced those problems, I mean, I personally experienced these things firsthand because I built a logistics business that owns trucks and faced too many problems. And as a result of that, saw that other people also had problems, cargo owners, cargo brokers, and many other transporters. So basically, what Triplo is trying to do is we're trying to create a new standard for road freight. And we're trying to reinvent how things are actually done in the whole road freight ecosystem across the continent. So we've built our own IP, our own technology, and that is based on really deep on the ground problems that we had our customers and research, etc. So Triplo is a cloud-based platform built in a very modularized way, where we've got multiple modules in terms of like microservices where we can tap into APIs, etc. However, we do three key things for the industry. When I talk the industry, I'm speaking the transporter, cargo owner, and cargo broker. So the first thing that we do is we've got a marketplace that facilitates the safe and efficient movement of cargo. So basically, we can facilitate the movement of anything from 10 kilograms right through to an abnormal 80-ton load. So we can move anything short haul and long haul across the continent, basically. And we do, both bulk, break bulk, and small type cargo. So that's what our marketplace does, where it connects demand from cargo owners and cargo brokers, such as in the FMCG space or in the mining space, that need their cargo moved. So we facilitate that. We provide the technology and the platform for that facilitation to happen. And we then match the cargo to a vetted and verified transporter who is very compliant. Then once that cargo is matched, we then do the second thing that our system does, which is to automate and optimize operations for transporters, etc., so that the trip itself, moving the goods from point A to point B, is as efficient and profitable as possible. Because you find that many systems are focusing on the different ends, matching demand and supply, but many people miss the middle, which is where the efficiencies come in. When you go into a store and there's no stock, sometimes it's not because the retailer is disorganized, but it's because there's been a road freight challenge somewhere in the line. So basically, we provide tools that automate and optimize the movement of the goods from point A to point B. And these tools are actually used whether you've gotten a load from us or not. So you can actually use them whether you have a load from us or not. Then the third thing that we've just begun doing, and we've seen the big value of strategic partnerships, is we've just begun facilitating for small transporters to get paid early. The whole market right now is 30 to 90 day payment terms, and a small transporter can't even afford 7 days. So we've partnered with some major listed companies, as an example, to facilitate for us to pay transporters as soon as they offload and the proof of delivery is fine. So basically, those are the three main things that we're doing. However, the value for the end user or for the cargo owner is that there's very high visibility in our system. So we give even third-party tracking, where even at 2 a.m. you can see exactly where your cargo is. And in addition to that, we obviously aggregating all these small transporters using our technology. And then ultimately, we want to be seen as a very large transporter so that we can actually stand for these small transporters to get actual contracts. Because right now, the market won't give you a contract if you're not a large player, unless it's one of the BE programs, as an example. So we're doing that through, we've got multiple modules that actually allow for a transporter to have a one-stop shop inside Triplo, as compared to accessing 20, 30 different systems. We're actually collapsing a lot of the core activities for logistics into one place, which is inside our platform.
Well, we certainly can't have a Most Innovative Companies Summit and Awards without talking about the awards. Now, this year we have our top 25. We also have our key winners. But I just want to talk to Wesley about the past winners versus the winners this year. What kind of shifts have you seen in between the group that was nominated in the top 25 last year versus the group that you are seeing this year out?
Yeah, so obviously the extent to which these companies have been resilient during this time of difficulty, for me, is one outstanding factor about them. That it's one thing to innovate during a time of peace, if I can put it that way. It's completely another to be confronted with so many obstacles, and still be able to grow, or at least to introduce new service offerings, you know. So they are unique for a number of reasons. I mean, one being that they've managed to, with so much difficulty, to still introduce new service offerings, or some of them even pivot and do something completely different to what they were doing before. So it is one of the reasons why this celebration for us, it's important, but also very much unique in that you will probably will never have companies that have had to endure with so much, you know, going forward. So they are a special group indeed.
If you look at the 25 from last year, the top 25 most innovative companies from last year, where are they now? Have they been flourishing? I mean, obviously you keep tabs on them.
Yeah. So there's one in particular, or at least a couple of them that we've watched, but one has been chosen or nominated this year again because they have introduced, right in the middle of the pandemic, a completely new product, and we'll get to learn more about them just now. The other one, we've just visited them. They've also introduced a very new product, which is in addition to what they developed then. So, you know, these guys, they just keep going, you know, and we are really impressed by what they've done, and I think it's one of the even more of a reason why we should be celebrating them today.
And fast forward to today's top 25. Have there been some, I mean, without giving too much away, have there been some that have really surprised you, like come completely out of left field, specifically in light of the challenges that COVID-19 has presented?
Yeah. So, you know, Lance, there are places that are hard to innovate for. There are environments that are difficult to innovate in. And we've seen companies going into markets that were ignored, right? We've seen companies going into industries that you never think of Africa when you talk about them. So for me, that is one of the reasons why I'm so excited about this group. I mean, if you look at the top 5 companies, some of them, they have introduced products that are the first in the world, right? So they are pioneers. You know, if you think of this whole notion that the challenges of Africa moving companies to innovate, we see that in these companies. You know, there are companies that have looked into spaces that no one wants to touch, and they've gone right in there and they've innovated for that.
Fantastic. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, your top 25 most innovative companies. So those were your top 25 most innovative companies of 2020 and into 2021. We now go to the big one, the top 5, the recipients of this fantastic award, this fantastic statuette that is standing right next to me. Wesley, you and I are going to have to chat about how I can get one of these into my office, maybe without innovating as much as the top 25 have done. Ladies and gentlemen, your top 5 most innovative companies are... So once again, a massive congratulations to our top 25 most innovative companies and of course our top 5 winners of the most coveted statuette. Now, it's all good and well for a company to innovate and for a company to be innovative, but it's more than that. One needs a support structure. One needs an enabling environment in order to become more innovative. And we will now hear about exactly how that environment is created right here in Africa.
So welcome, Dr. Sibanda, to the Fast Company Most Innovative Companies Summit. We are really looking forward to learn from you a lot about innovation in South Africa, but particularly around the Gauteng region, partly because of the book you've written, Nuts and Bolts, which really take us through your journey of taking care of the innovation hub in Gauteng. So the first question that I want to put to you is really about innovation in Gauteng. Tell us about the state of innovation in Gauteng.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Wesley, for having me, on the summit. And it's really, a pleasure to be talking about innovation because, as I say in the book, innovation, not aid, is the answer to growth in Africa. And in particular, in South Africa, as we face a number of problems and challenges, unemployment, inequality, and poverty. And we can only find our answers in innovation. So Gauteng is quite an important region, not only to South Africa, but to Africa. I think from a population point of view, it accounts for 22% of South Africa's population. As a GDP, it's about 34% of South Africa's GDP. And it's the 5th largest economy in Africa. So it is actually very, very, very important. And I think Gauteng has always been visionary, going back to the early 2000s. They realized that they needed to create a smart province. And I think you may recall the Blue IQ then, which was the launching pad for many projects, including the Gautrain, was launched through Blue IQ, and that was the birth of the Innovation Hub. And so innovation has always been important for Gauteng. It houses a lot of academic and research institutes, And therefore, from a patent output, it's also produces the highest number of patents in South Africa in terms of a region. And what we've seen over the years, if I look, perhaps going back to the early 2000s, has been a growth of the importance of innovation in Gauteng. And whereas most of the activities used to be focused around the innovation hub in Pretoria because of its proximity to the CSIR and University of Pretoria, it's a growth of an ecosystem, and particularly Johannesburg becoming also a hub, for innovation. And innovation in Gauteng cuts across from the private sector, academic research institutions. We're seeing them spinning out, companies. If we look just at Wits and Tshimologong precinct, and that is a product of visionaries like Professor Barry Dolowski, whom I was very fortunate to collaborate with. And he foresaw, in essence, a need to almost replicate the ecosystem in Pretoria, in Johannesburg. And through that, we now have Tshimologong, which is doing amazing things. But also there is innovation within the public sector. And we've seen government in Gauteng embracing innovation. And we've seen also the Center for Public Service Innovation focusing on innovation within, government. And again, one reads in terms of the importance of Gauteng, the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation Development, is also published a report on the territorial review of Gauteng, and it highlights innovation as being critical, but also it highlights three challenges to the growth of innovation and also startups. The main critical one being the markets are controlled by large and established businesses.
Interesting. No, that's true. And having read the book, you highlight the role that Innovation Hub has played in harnessing the innovation within townships in Gauteng. You want to take us through that journey of, or at least the role that you played in making sure that there's innovation within our township, particularly in the Gauteng region?
Yeah. So when I got recruited and started in February 2011, my mandate was to reposition the Innovation Hub to focus on innovation. So I didn't really know where to start because this was the first science and technology park that I had ever dealt with. But fortunately for me, I had spent the previous 8 years within the National System of Innovation, having been with the Innovation Fund and also with the Technology Innovation Agency. So we looked at what was the Innovation Hub focusing on. And we repositioned that to then focus on the bioeconomy, the green economy, as well as smart industries. But as time went on, we realized that our efforts were only confined, in essence, to this boundary that everyone saw as the Innovation Hub. But yet the 2012 innovation strategy for Gauteng said that the Innovation Hub needed to be repositioned as an innovation agency of the province. And then we started to think long and hard and say, is innovation inclusive the way that we're implementing it? And we realized that it was not inclusive. Why? Because entrepreneurs in the township had difficulty getting to the Innovation Hub precinct in Pretoria. And we said, well, how can we take innovation to our people? In fact, that became the tagline, taking innovation to the people. And luckily, the city of Tshwane, there was a lady there called Zugisa Ngonyana. She was also thinking the same. And we realized that we did not have money to build another innovation hub in the township. And we said, but how about if we utilize municipality-owned buildings or government-owned buildings in the townships and repurpose them, but put in the exact infrastructure that one would find at the Innovation Hub in Pretoria, and also provide the exact support, mentorship, coaching, and funding wherever it was available. And so that was the birth of Ekasi Lab. And so I was fortunate to have an intern in my office. She talks about that in the book. So she's written a short piece about that. And we started off in Harankuwa, established the first Ekasi Lab as an innovation center in the township. And therefore, entrepreneurs in the township could walk to these centers, alternatively take one taxi and be in a facility where they can be supported. Fast forward, by the time I left in 2018, there were 10 of these Ekasi labs scattered throughout Gauteng. And they were also at that time supporting over 400 entrepreneurs and startups. And I'm pleased, to say that some of them have gone on to create viable jobs and they're sustainable businesses. But I think quite importantly, Wesley, is also, when we reflect on the journey of Ekasi Labs, we also had to think hard and say, what is the future economy and how can we make innovation accessible to the youth in the townships? And so the focus was looking for problems in their own communities and them coming up with solutions. But also we established a software development academy called Code Tribe to teach young people how to code. And over a 2-year period, we had trained and graduated over 200 young people that got employed, and some started their own startups in software coding, and some of them have gone on to gaming and virtual reality.
Wow, that's amazing. Would you say that Technovera, the developer of Pillowbox, is one of your products, township type, initiative? Want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I wouldn't classify him as one of the township ones. I mean, he came in with an interesting, concept. And so what he eventually rolled out and what is being rolled out now for public health in the townships and hospitals for people to collect their medicines is actually a pivot, because his first innovation was for people to collect parcels, and he had a pilot put up at Kilani Mall. But unfortunately, that failed, dismally. And then he went on. He had, TB at some point, and so I think from that particular challenge of figuring out how he was getting his own TB medicines, previously, he came up in essence with this pivot, and indeed, he's built, quite a good business. So I mean, there's there's a lady that features in the book as well that does cosmetics, came out of the township. There's also a guy called Martin that has developed amazing speakers, so for sound, music, and these have been featured, globally. He comes out of Ekasi Lab, Soweto, and so I believe that the townships are, in essence, the hotbed for innovation. And I think it's important for us to redefine what we mean by innovation, and it needs to be all-encompassing. It's about finding solutions, regardless of how big or small the solution is. It doesn't have to be radical, and we need to reward young people for finding solutions and actually innovating, particularly in the township, because that's, in essence, the future of this country.
In the book, you mentioned challenges in the innovation process, if I can put it that way. If you had the power, which hurdle to innovation would you remove and why?
So if I was talking, I mean, if you ask the same question to an entrepreneur, they would tell you funding. But I beg to differ. I think that the biggest hurdle in the system is the one of access to market. In the book, I refer to the regulatory hurdles, particularly the PFMA, And I think we've got to realize that government is a big market. And many of the innovations that young people come up with are innovations that are born out of their own frustration with dealing with government. So it's service delivery, innovations. It's innovations to make government much more efficient. It's innovations to address our education system, and so forth. And what one finds is that it's so difficult for these to be taken up by government. They end up going on tender. And I think that what really is required is almost a preferential procurement provision in the PFMA or the procurement laws that enables government to give contracts to entrepreneurs and innovators that actually have got innovations that address service delivery. Because that way there is a reference, there is an ability for them to pilot their minimum viable product, and having piloted, then in the next phase, they can be able to compete on tenders, but also quite importantly, they can be able to take some of those innovations out of government and perhaps into the private sector or in other countries. So that is one, component that I would, in essence, really move hard to actually deal with. I think if I was given a second one, I'll come back and then say to the entrepreneurs, yes, let's address the funding one. And here, I published a blog a month or two back at Sibanda, Legacy, .Africa, that says that we're not short of funding. I think it's a mismanagement of the funding that we actually have available, and perhaps a poor allocation of that funding along the innovation value chain. And therefore, I would then ensure that there's customized funding, small amounts from about 100,000 Rand to about 1 million that are dispersed to entrepreneurs much more easily. So the whole process shouldn't take more than 3 months to reject or approve. And that way allow entrepreneurs to fail fast but learn. I think we are too risk averse, and we need to just reposition how we work with entrepreneurs.
We have a wonderful saying in Africa, it takes a village to raise a child, and it's never been more apt when we're talking about an innovative company. A company can be as innovative as they like, but without the correct enabling environment around it and correct ecosystem supporting them, it's very difficult to succeed. We have with us Sumarie Roodt from Silicon Cape. Silicon Cape is that enabling environment for innovative companies, is it not?
Absolutely. It's such an essential part of any entrepreneurial ecosystem, really. And I think that's also why we've seen Cape Town really become Africa's tech hub, is because of this enabling ecosystem that we have that supports, technology entrepreneurs, investors, and everybody really to grow the number of innovative companies, not only in South Africa, but also on the continent.
No, that's true. We can't speak about Cape Town without talking about the continent, partly because, the impact that local companies have is beyond the region, really. And with that in mind, Sumarie, what can you say is the state of innovation right now in the continent, obviously taking into account Cape Town as well?
I think we are at a tipping point, possibly, and a tipping point in a really positive way. I think that Africa is uniquely positioned to embrace what is known as, what we've commonly known as for the fourth industrial revolution in terms of those technologies, and that includes anything from blockchain, artificial intelligence, and a number of other technologies. But in terms of that, I believe that we are uniquely positioned as a continent to leapfrog into the next era of what this incredible content of innovators can do. There are obviously numerous challenges, which none of us are blind to, But is the opportunity there for Africa to leapfrog to the front of the innovation table globally? Absolutely.
Yeah, no, for sure. And as Lance has indicated, Silicon Cape plays a very significant role in making that possible. Do you want to talk a little bit about what exactly does Silicon Cape does to enable the environment to be innovative?
I mean, so at its core, there are really 4 key things that we do, and I can talk you through those. But it is much more complicated than that in terms of, it is not just Silicon Cape that makes it work. I would argue that it is this community that we've structured here within the Western Cape and that we're now trying to expand to other parts of not only South Africa, but Africa, that has really created that type of enabling environment. So I just want to be mindful of the fact that we don't just say it was Silicon Cape, because it by no means was just Silicon Cape. So one of the key things that we've noticed to try and inspire the growth of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in any place in the world is telling of stories. So because what we find is that people are often looking for relatable role models. Okay, and if we aren't telling the stories of successful entrepreneurs, that have gone from startup into scale up and have expanded globally, it's very difficult also for people to take that leap of faith and to become an entrepreneur themselves if there is no one relatable for them to do that with. The next part of what we do is we connect. I think of us as a connector of people, a connector of organizations, a connector of cities. We've recently embarked on a 2-year collaboration with Stockholm. So it's a Cape Town-Stockholm Connect, which is really all about exposing to entrepreneurs in those 2 cities to each other, learning from each other, and offering African entrepreneurs expansion opportunities into Europe via Stockholm, and offering Swedish entrepreneurs expansion opportunities into Africa, via Cape Town. There's advocacy work which happens, and I can give you an example of that at this point in time, is where we are actively engaged on developing a startup act for South Africa. If we look at what is happening also continentally, there are other countries at this point in time that are actually ahead of South Africa that have already established their startup act. Tunisia is an example, Senegal, Rwanda is working on it, Kenya. We're actually lagging at this point in time, and we're trying to catch up. And I think we will soon, but that's, for example, a piece of advocacy work that we're currently working on. And historically, we've worked on things like what is called the Section 12J Fund, which is the legal structure of venture capital funds in this country, et cetera, exchange control laws, all of that. And the advocacy work is all about making it easier for people to start businesses in this country, and being able to then connect them with, obviously, other entities across Africa and the world. And then there's a curation aspect. And the curation is really related to the lack of reliable and valid data that is available about our local ecosystem. I don't know how many of you have looked, for example, for specific data. Let's say you were looking for maybe things around healthcare, the healthcare, and I don't mean the public healthcare system, I mean the healthcare startup ecosystem, or statistics around that. It's really difficult. It's a pity, really, that in terms of Africa, there generally seems to be a lack of reliable and valid data. So part of what we do is to try and curate that data. And the curation doesn't mean that we develop the data ourselves necessarily. It means that we collaborate with other entities, and in many cases also research entities. I mean, we do a lot of work with the public institution, the World Bank. We work with universities to try and then collectively put together valid and reliable data that can be used. Because it's very difficult also to tell our story. Everything's interconnected if we don't have that data. And it's also very difficult to pitch for something if you don't even know what the market size is locally that you're possibly looking at. So those are just the 4 key things that we do. And then the key part is the connected part and the collaboration part. Silicon Cape works extensively with other organizations throughout Africa and also globally, to try and expand this entrepreneurial ecosystem enabling network, and to address many of the challenges that we still have ahead of us, because the work is never done.
I wanted to ask about South Africa's entrepreneurial mindset, that we are problem solvers.
Absolutely.
And we try to, and I mean, how do we how do you at Silicon Cape, how do we as a country foster that entrepreneurial mindset? How do we raise more innovators?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the stuff that keeps us awake at night, because that's what it's about. It is about creating an environment that makes people want to become entrepreneurs, and successful ones at that. I mean, we all know that entrepreneurship takes a number of tries before one maybe makes it to, you know, going from startup to scale up, but we keep on trying. And that's what matters. And I think, so there are two key things for me. Let me answer that in two parts, if you don't mind. The first part is that we try to advocate for the fact that failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is part of the recipe for success. And I think that is incredibly key. Is in our ecosystem, you don't get judged for failing. You actually get applauded. And we ask you to come and tell your stories. It's called, excuse my language, up nights. Now, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that if I'm not edited out. You know, where we share of what went wrong, and we learn from that and we try again, and we're supported by the ecosystem. So I think that's a really key aspect of it. Yeah.
You know, before you joined us, Wesley and I were chatting, and we were talking about this idea of ecosystems. We were talking about Silicon Valley, Wesley. We were saying the reason a company in Silicon Valley succeeds is because the universities are in place, the school systems are in place, the overarching infrastructure is in place. How do we get there? I imagine we're on our way there.
Definitely.
How do we get there? Where right from the ground, from almost a preschool level, from a toys level, what can I as a parent do to make sure that I get my child there, that I help get this nation there?
I would argue that we allow ourselves to be curious. You know, you'll often hear from innovators. It's something I often hear from innovative, not only companies, but entrepreneurs themselves, is they say, and they always quote Einstein, and they say that they're passionately curious. I think it's about allowing ourselves to be curious, and to be curious in a way that allows us to experiment and explore, where there is a safety net, where we explore in a way that, you know, doesn't potentially have real life consequences in terms of what the possible kickback is. And I don't mean kickback money, but I mean kickback like if something goes wrong, you know. In terms of, you know, how do we as a nation then already from a very young age, I think we are seeing some very positive changes in the South African ecosystem, specifically where we are now introducing modules from primary school level. You would have seen in terms of robotics, coding. I mean, I'm a technologist, so you know, I definitely support that. I'm not saying it's for everyone, and that's why I quite like the acronym STEAM as opposed to STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths, because we need all of those skills, you know. And I think there's this sort of singular focus on technical skills or technology-based skills, and there's science and maths, and then there's the arts. And I think we need to realize that we need all of those things at the same time. So I think it's being open to those changes in terms of exposing our children from a very young age to creative thinking, you know, and playing. Play is such an essential part also of innovation, right? And we stop playing as we grow up, and it just seems counterintuitive in terms of what we really need from an entrepreneurship perspective. I think it would also be to be open-minded and encourage our young adult population to pursue entrepreneurial pursuits, despite what, you know, some of the cultural stigmas may be around that, and to be supportive. Again, I would say in terms of Cape Town, it's got every ingredient to succeed in terms of this regard. We have incredible higher education institutions, literally within a 20-kilometer radius of the city center. I mean, obviously there's the University of Cape Town, there's UWC, there's a number of institutions, you know, so there are also research institutes. For example, the cost of skills to acquire them here is much less, like to rent a software developer, you know, is anything like maybe about 40% cheaper than in a like in a more advanced economy. So but many things. But you also can't forget the softer side of things. You cannot forget the lifestyle aspects of Cape Town. I mean, we just need to look outside your window and look how gorgeous it is. And many entrepreneurs say to us that they choose Cape Town as a startup base because of the lifestyle aspects, but the community, the availability of skills, the relative ease of doing business, because, for example, here in the Western Cape government has established what is called the Red Tape Reduction Unit, and it's all about trying to make it easy to build your business here in Cape Town. And those things are essential. We are definitely not Silicon Valley, nor do we want to be. Because Africa is very different from America. And we need to remember that. And I find it interesting when entrepreneurs come from Silicon Valley and then they want to tell us how to do things here. And often it won't succeed because things are just different here. I mean, we can learn much from them. And of course, they are seen as a beacon of innovation. And one can learn from the best of breed there. But we really believe in African solutions to African problems. So, yeah.
No, Sumarie, I must say it's been an insightful, conversation we've had with you to get a better understanding of what makes these innovation companies that we're celebrating currently. What is it that supports them and all things like that. So we want to say thank you very much for sharing such powerful insights with us, and we can only wish you the best in continuing to make this environment more innovative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I've decided to have a bit of a change of scenery because, sitting in one place for too long does get a little bit taxing on these old bones. But we are nearing the end of our program. This certainly has been an incredibly innovative event. And speaking about innovative events, Wesley, where do you see the future of events going? I mean, we're used to this kind of environment now.
So COVID has forced us to think about virtual events. Zoom has been the main sort of platform, if you want. I'm sure there are others as well. So what we're doing today is really part of that. But I think we're not there yet. I think a lot will come out of this virtual space. What I foresee happening is that the virtual reality type of environment will flourish. We know that major device manufacturers are working on VR headsets. So I foresee that in the future you will have people watching events like these but wearing VR headsets, essentially being brought into the environment of an event, and they would feel like they are there and they'll be able to interact with people, So this is just the beginning. So I think even with us, we are working very hard with partners in the tech space to really revolutionize events.
So are you saying that Fast Company South Africa's most innovative companies Summit and Awards could one day soon take place on a headset?
Exactly. So you'll be sitting at home wearing your VR headset and really experience this. Experience it with other people while sitting at home.
So what is the future for next year? What does most innovative companies hold for 2022?
So 2022, we are going to watch very carefully what companies broadly are doing throughout 2021. So some of them are companies that were nominated this year. So we see promising companies already, but we think that, these companies are going to do amazing things throughout this year. So we will be watching them very, very, very carefully. I think another important aspect, that will be part of 2022 is, is an innovation dashboard. So we don't just want to celebrate, but we want to become a very important player in the innovation space. So we want companies who are interested in investing in innovative companies to come to Fast Company and assess the innovation happening in South Africa. But we want that to be something that they can trust, to view how are these companies progressing over years. So watch out for our event in 2022, where I think there will be more than what we've managed to offer this year.
Fantastic. Wesley Dipoko, the editor-in-chief of Fast Company South Africa. Thank you so much. But that is it from us, from the Fast Company South Africa Most Innovative Companies Summit and Awards 2021. Goodbye.